Welcome, everyone. This is the Art of Product podcast. I'm your host, Derek Reimer, and today Ben is on vacation for the 4th of July week, and so I thought it'd be fun to bring on one of the OG Drip crew members, Ian Nance. How's it going, Ian?
Hi, everyone. Doing good.
Cool. So Ian you've been on the Drip team for about 3 years, if I'm doing the math right. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah, I think, official 3-year anniversary next month, maybe. Yeah.
Awesome. So I thought it'd be fun to talk a bit about your backstory and how you got into software development, because I think it's a little bit unique. So why don't you tell us, what were you doing before you got into programming?
Well, let's see. I guess before starting with Drip and before even being in programming, I went to graduate school for philosophy, and I did a PhD in philosophy, and so immediately before getting into it, I was working as an adjunct professor at a couple places in Fresno, a couple different universities, as adjuncts do, I mean, I guess for a number of reasons, decided that maybe it was worth looking into some other options there. I mean, partly because the sort of academic job market is especially bad, and partly because I had sort of personal constraints on it that were limiting my prospects. Like I wanted to stay in the area I was, which is like not a strategy you can really have if you want to really have a go.
Yeah, I remember you telling us when we were talking to you. I remember you saying that there's a handful of positions in the country, and you kind of have to wait for someone to die in order to get one of those professorships, right?
That's right, and that's especially true if you're looking at like a small area. You know what I mean? There's in the if you want to stay in any particular area, there's like so many universities there. And yeah, exactly. You're just like, you can like name the people that you're waiting to retire or die or whatever. And
yep.
And I don't know, like there were sort of other reasons that I thought about fiddling around with something else. And so I honestly hadn't done much computer stuff like really at all. I was like,
yeah, that's the thing that blows my mind about your story is like most of the time when people are self-taught developers or get into it later on, they've at least been like tinkering around with it as a hobby, on the side, or just doing it kind of in their job already. But I don't think you did either of those. So do you remember what it was that like got you interested in the first place?
So I had fiddled around like way back, like in high school, I'd taken classes and done programming. I mean, this is in BASIC and Pascal and stuff. So it was like, it was a long time back. And I mean, I'd really like, I had a TI-83 that I wrote programs on, so it was like, I fiddled with some of that, but then I had sort of just been away from it for a long time. I think it definitely helped that I'd done, a fair amount of like mathematical logic and whatnot as part of my philosophical training or whatever. And I mean, I had a sort of special interest in that for part of graduate school. And so like, I hadn't written a function, for a computer in years, but I'd fiddled around with like the lambda calculus, and I don't know, it's like there were a bunch of concepts that would turn out to be useful programming concepts that I was like, had been thinking about, during my lead up to actually getting into any practical application of it, that I think was, that helped a lot,
That's kind of the sense that I've gotten. Like, I remember so the first time I met you, I was teaching a Rails class through the local like training academy in Fresno, and you just happened to take the class. And at the time Drip was sponsoring a Rails class in order to basically find and create some junior developers to hire on the team, because we weren't really having much luck finding, any Rails developers in the Fresno area. The market has gotten a little better now, but it's still pretty small. So I remember you being in that class, and I think it was like near the end, and as things go after a 6-week class, the numbers kind of dwindled. And I recall like it was on the final day, and we were basically building a Twitter clone throughout the course of the class. You remember that?
Yeah. Flutter, I think.
And
right.
I thought it'd be a fun exercise on the last day to try to construct the query to build like the timeline. So, tweets of people you follow and people who follow you, and kind of like all the joins involved with that. So it was you and one other guy who showed up to the last day. And we were working through the problem. At a certain point, I was like, so you're familiar with SQL, right? And you're like, actually, no, I've never even used it. But we managed to like construct inner joins and like some crazy like grouping. I don't know. That's what blew my mind. I was like, where is this guy figuring out how to do this stuff if you've never actually seen the concept? So do you feel like it's like a lot from philosophy training?
That was like before getting back into doing any development stuff. I think that did sort of lead the way, like thinking a lot about mathematical logic and these philosophical questions about foundations of mathematics. But you got to fiddle around with like a bunch of set theory and things to even like approach them rigorously or whatever. And so I'd done a bunch of that. And then between that and getting into that Rails course, I had done some more. I'd actually done some like programming stuff. But it was all like I did a number of courses online. I went through Udacity and did several sort of online courses, starting with an introduction and then getting into some other, I don't know, just sort of filling things out. Some of that stuff was getting more and more familiar by the time I was in the Rails course that you were teaching. And I think that was maybe my fourth class I'd taken through that local development training thing too. So, just by being in those other courses and, Googling things when they come up and stuff, I was like slowly filling in a bunch of gaps about how this stuff like works in practice or whatever. Yeah.
Was there ever a moment where you thought like that you couldn't actually translate what you were learning into an actual job? Or did you always think that like the skills you were building would land you into a career in software development?
I guess I don't know. I think I went back and forth. I guess it was like I didn't want to get ahead of myself when I signed up for whatever intro to computer programming through Udacity. I wasn't like, well, the job is surely in my near future. Right. I was like, okay, trying to be realistic about it. But I don't know. I think getting into, honestly, it was probably in those courses, those in-person courses at the little training center in Fresno that like really helped shift gears for me into like seeing how this could really be like a practical thing. I mean, because the other thing about, in taking those online courses, they were like real interesting, but they were still a kind of at least one level of abstraction up from doing an actual like working in a development job, because it was like, it's all in this little interface and you're learning all the programming stuff, but in terms of like, what are the tools that an actual, working developer uses to like, get through their day, like that stuff I didn't really get exposed to until those like live classes like the one you taught. And so I think maybe once I started getting into those and seeing like, I don't know, you start seeing some examples of like, oh, here's like some real thing that someone has built, and I think I see more or less how parts of that got built. And so I don't see any reason I couldn't build parts of something like that myself. You know what I mean? Like, a good moment, now that I think about it, where I sort of felt like this was going to be a good fit or whatever. And it was in the interview I did after that Rails course. I interviewed with you and Rob for the job. You were interviewing people in the course. And I remember there was a point where I think Rob was, interested in sort of like, it wasn't like a technical interview at all. I mean, I'd just been through the course, and so you sort of like were familiar with what I could.
It was essentially a 6-week technical interview leading up to
exactly,
that.
Yeah. And so the interview where Rob was actually there, I think he was sort of feeling out personality and some of this other stuff, and just seeing like how I'd fit on the team and all that kind of business. I mean, it's a very small team. It was mostly but I remember him asking, "How are you going to handle when you've got to like sit in there and dig into something for just like hours at a time?" And like I remember thinking, well, is that like a thing that people have to handle? Because for whatever reason, that just like comes very naturally, like I've been doing it like, in working on projects for these courses and all this kind of stuff that like, it wasn't even like the idea that it's like, oh, here's some task that's going to require you to like concentrate on these like, noodly programming details for like, several hours at a stretch. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a delight, frankly. I mean, I don't know what, I think he seemed satisfied with that answer too. And so I was like, okay, yeah, this is like, there's like a sort of temperamental fit, or I don't know, whatever aspects of personality are involved, or like, this is going to, it like feels good to do it. Like there's like a part of your brain that's just sort of getting massaged when you're doing that kind of work. And if it's like satisfying for you, then like, that's a very good sign that, like if that's your job all day, you're going to have like, reasonable job satisfaction, like as long as people are leaving you alone otherwise, like it's pretty good. Yeah.
There's a bunch of good stuff from the way you were thinking about the process. I mean, one, I think a lot of people feel like they either have to have a CS degree or they have to have some kind of like special training that they're never going to be able to achieve, or it's going to be really difficult to achieve, when really it's all about like, you get out what you put into it, So like you put in the work. You started taking online classes, you took this class in person, and you kind of believed that you could do it from the get-go, which is good. Like, some may say that's naive, but it's actually not, because that's reality at least for software development. Like, the more concepts you teach yourself, you're constantly adding to your toolkit. And, before long, you kind of have a set of marketable skills that are going to be really attractive to any company,
Oh, I was just going to say, this is like, along those same lines, and thinking about when this sort of felt realistic is like, I think another thing that was nice about interacting with people through the local academy and the in-person stuff is you see these people, other people who are already, like yourself, like who are already working these kinds of jobs, and you see how they approach problems and whatnot. And well, so I have in mind, like, I mean, I don't know, probably in the very first class, I realized that, when the instructor was like, not sure about something, well, they just like Googled it and, started looking on Stack Overflow. And I was like, well, hey, that's what I do. Like, oh, that's actually like normal practice for grown-up developers, you know what I mean? And so, I don't know, seeing that little window into sort of the real life of a developer was helpful for making it seem less like insurmountable, like, oh, those are like all fancy people who know so much more than me, and it'd be like impossible for me to enter that. And it's like, these people definitely know a lot more than me and everything, but it's like, I see the route the route they climbed up, and there's no reason I can't sort of do the same thing, Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we all happen to we have a certain amount of like information cached in our heads, where it's like, okay, maybe we have like the core low-level APIs of Rails kind of memorized, where we can like quickly access them. They're right there in the front of our minds because we work them all the time. But if any of us were to spend like 3 to 6 months, or maybe, I don't know, somewhere thereabouts, working in a different technology stack, and then we jump back over to Rails, I mean, we would probably be doing a lot more Googling, regardless of how experienced you are as a developer, The part that sticks with you is the problem solving capability. I mean, it's less tangible, I guess, but and I think that's something that you happen to have like really sharpened through your studying for philosophy. And this just goes to show it doesn't have to be computer science that you study to kind of hone those skills. I myself, I was not a computer science major. I was a math major, so I kind of had similar backgrounds to you, where like, I spent a lot of time in college working through like mathematical proofs and set theory and linear algebra, and like some of these disciplines that do in a certain way line up with fundamentals of programming. So I think some of the funnest times I've had working on Drip is when you and I are standing in front of a whiteboard, and maybe we're like working on some new optimization strategy for the subscriber filter or something like that. And it's like, I remember one time we were standing there and like, all right, let's write out a truth table. And I'm like, yes, this is going to be good, because we're getting down the truth tables.
Yeah, stuff like that is like a good example, actually, of like almost any time you're going to do some significant problem, or you're going to plan out some significant piece of architecture. It doesn't even have to be super huge. It's like the first level you start at usually is like several levels above any particular like programming language. You know what I mean? Like, the first things that go on the whiteboard are definitely not Ruby code. You know what I mean? Like, there's like a much higher level of like, what I need to grasp what this is like going to look like, and how this is going to be broken up, and like there's a whole process of like moving from that all the way down to eventually you got to write some specific code, some specific language. But like, yeah, there's a whole journey on the way. Yeah. And a whole set of skills getting exercised before the stuff that you might need to Google comes up.
I think that's been a good lesson, like from the position of leading the team and looking for new people to add to the team. It's made it really clear that it's much more important to look for that love of problem solving, and people who kind of get a high off of going deep like that, and looking for that much more than looking for like how proficient are you in Ruby. because the Ruby proficiency actually really doesn't matter that much. Like, you may be the best Ruby coder in the world, but if you can't problem solve, then,
that's right.
How far are you going to get, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's good stuff. You've been doing a lot of, well, I think you started a couple years ago doing kind of technical support, like the next line of defense, when anytime anything gets escalated to the point where we need to look in code. Do you kind of get the same enjoyment out of troubleshooting customer problems?
I mean, a lot of them, well, especially now, because now I'm like one level back on technical support. So there's one support engineer sort of in front of me. And so if it comes to me, it's probably some kind of weird bug or something that's going to be sort of fun to dig into, I mean, not everyone is fun. Like if it like involves time zones or something, I still like
every developer curses at time zones.
Shake my fist when I can just like feel it coming, where it's like, oh, I see, I'm gonna have to look at this annoying bit of code. No, definitely. Like, I mean, yeah, a lot of it, like, especially like customer problems end up being technical problems, and so yeah, those are like pretty often fun to dig into. That's also, since you mentioned it, like that's really, I think, ended up for me being like an invaluable part of my sort of on the job education is doing the support stuff, because it meant that it was like requiring me to sort of like over time like look at, even if I'm not like directly modifying, but like trying to figure out stuff in like every part of the app. And so that meant a whole lot of different stuff and pieces and moving parts and like just different stuff that I had to look at, you know what I mean? And it's like if I'd just been doing regular development as like a junior developer where, I'm just like, here's a little task, something small that you can build, and I build it, I would definitely have, like, I did that too, and like you learn from that, absolutely. But I think having to like, there's a problem over here, and it's like, I've never even looked at this. What is this? And so like, I got to sort out, okay, and now I'm learning a whole bunch of stuff along the way about like, obviously about the particular application I'm working in, but again, at that one level up of abstraction, it's like, oh, okay, this is another strategy for laying out some, architecting some classes and, whatever you need to be figuring out. It's like having to bounce around to every part of things and dig into stuff in every little area, I think, like, really upped the sort of learning curve for me in terms of like figuring out how everything works in a real application.
Yeah, these days Drip is a, many thousands of lines of code. I'm not sure if we're up to 100,000 lines of code or not, because Rails tends to be a little more concise in other languages, but it's a lot of code. So there's a lot of different subsystems, and I suspect you might understand some of the code I wrote better than I do at this point, because you've probably troubleshooted it.
One thing that's nice about like hunting for bugs or figuring out, I don't know, some customer issue or something is like, yeah, I do have to like do sometimes, just like do very low level walkthroughs of every step in something that otherwise might not get, walk through, I mean, it's like, there's test covers and everyone's sort of looking at it, and, but like, yeah, sometimes those weird little details only come out because somebody has some issue. I mean, yeah, I guess that's like the edge cases come out of real life. It's sort of yeah.
I think perhaps one of your most valuable like mindset characteristics is that I've never heard you say, well, that's just impossible. It can't be doing that. If we like see some evidence, you're pretty relentless about getting to the root of the problem. And I think that's, that's something that all of us can learn from, probably. Because
yeah, there's like a part of my brain where it's just like a phenomenon without an explanation. It's just very itchy, and it's like, no, there's some reason it's doing that, like, and it's like, even if it's intermittent, it's like somehow, somewhere, there's like some explanation for this, and like, yeah, it's like I'll like really dig around until I can scratch it,
Yeah. I think customers have remarked before, who've used Drip, like, my gosh, how do you guys have so few bugs? And I know that, like, from our perspective, we all see the bugs, and we know that Drip is definitely not bug-free software, and there's always minor bugs here and there. But on the whole, I think
certain circumstances, sometimes.
Yeah, maybe affecting a small subset of customers, i.e., all of them. But I think overall, I think the reason the software feels so bugless in general is because we haven't tended to let those little things slip through. It's like, if it's like an intermittent thing that happens very rarely, some teams might just say, well, we'll just chalk that up to, random intermittent,
it does that sometimes,
Yeah. Where I think, we kind of go the extra mile and it pays off for sure.
And, I think that's true even when, because I feel like this pattern happens once in a while too, where it's like, you can understand what's happening, like you get the explanation, and then once you have the explanation, you're like, okay, either this is a low priority fix, or this is like a real fix for this rare intermittent problem would involve like a pretty big refactor, so it's going to have to be pushed down the line a little bit. That definitely happens, but that is different than, as you say, is like, well, it just happens sometimes without really knowing what it is, because even having a catalog of all those issues, like understood issues, that just helps keep things running smoothly, because, sometimes those little things connect to some other little thing that happens later, and you're like, I remember that bug came up over here, and okay, now it is time to do that refactor or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think we have some issues file that's like, it's not even necessarily a bug. It's just a behavior, like some operator in our criteria. I don't even remember what it is exactly, but I know there's some operator that behaves in a way that's not necessarily intuitive, but one could argue that, it's perhaps operating in the right way right now. So it's like kind of a judgment call, and there's like some, potential to break existing things. So I know we have this issue filed, and it's like, we're still kind of on the fence of whether we're going to fix it or not, but at least it's known to us. So anytime there's a question, like someone else happens to recognize it in the wild and emails to support, we at least have like an ongoing documented issue for it. You and I were you were out in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago visiting, and we were sitting on a rooftop just kind of BSing about code. And I mentioned Elm, and you said, oh yeah, I was just checking out Elm the other week. How do you discover new technology like that? And are there any others you've been looking at?
I was just reading some blog or something. I don't have like a real consistent fixed practice where I'm like, okay, I listen to these podcasts every week and I read these blogs and I try, it's like, it's a little more organic, I'm just like poking around, thinking about stuff, or, like, I think I read some blog post that sort of just convinced me it was like worth a look, and, loaded up the tutorial. There was some internal discussion of getting Elixir going as part of Drip in the future, and so I've been little bits of like dipping toes in there and starting to feel around and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's kind of a mix of that. It's like sometimes driven by things you just come across. Other times, like now, especially now that we've got like a larger team and whatever, there's like a whole bunch of people that have like stuff they might, even if it's stuff they just mention, or like an older project, I remember we used this, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should look that up and see what that's about, that kind of thing. Yeah.
You still have an inherent curiosity for technology.
I think so. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good, healthy thing to have. And yeah, I mean, in my playing around with Elm, so listeners of this podcast know that Ben has been pitching me on checking out Elm lately, because it's a pretty functionally pure programming language. Like, it's along the lines of Haskell, and so it has a static type system and a compiler. So if you write code and you have to specify your types, and if your types don't align, it just won't compile. So it almost like eliminates the need for a lot of the types of tests you would write in a more dynamic language like Ruby. It does have like the ability to pass functions around as their own types, and so it's like, it's pretty pure on the functional scale of things. Does that type of language speak to you? I feel like that would align well with the way you conceptualize the world of programming.
Yeah, I think maybe so. Like, Ruby is, by far my main day-to-day for several years now, that like I've definitely got my head switched into that space most of the time, sort of more object-oriented kind of thing. But it's almost like I think I share that intuition, and I like want to fiddle around with it and find out if it's true, that I think that will feel a little, I think that does feel very normal. So I guess before I did Ruby, I mentioned I'm doing all these online classes, and those were almost all in Python, which is like, not like pure functional, but like some of what I was doing in there had a more functional flavor than like I think my day-to-day Ruby stuff in Drip. And that, I think it is, that is pretty natural. I don't know. Maybe it's just a matter of taste or something, and I've learned to like be okay with different flavors of things. But I am kind of, the Elixir thing was interesting because that, I think I do want to sort of see what my brain feels like on functional on a functional setup.
And functional and immutability. I think like anytime we I find like a lot of the bugs we're diagnosing or just odd behavior has to do with mutability, where you can take an object in Ruby and change its internal state, and now like that has unintended side effects. And I think one of the things you'll find really nice about Elixir is that, one, it feels very Ruby-ish, so it's kind of like a gateway into functional from Ruby land, and then also it has like immutable data structures, like nothing, you can never mutate state. You always have to, either reassign the pointer to the variable you're working with or just pass a new value, I've been playing a fair amount with Elixir just on the side, just because I'm in a season right now where I want to be exploring new technologies and not get like stuck in my ways and being like, I'm only a Ruby developer, Yeah, the functional languages are definitely have my attention right now. Do you have any other tips for someone who is maybe in the position you were back 3 years ago when you're looking to make a career shift to get into software development?
So first, there's like so much online, like there's so many resources, like for, all the different little code schools and academies, and there's a million things where you can learn some of that. And so like that definitely, I don't know, maybe it depends on your personality, but for me, that was definitely the place to start. And that's like really good for getting yourself up there. The other thing is, I think it is really valuable to like find some way that you can like start interacting with people that are doing it for real. Like for me, it was like that local academy was really great in filling that role, because like the instructors and the other students, and that's good for a bunch of reasons. Like, first of all, like I was saying earlier, it gets you in touch with the sort of practical, on-the-ground tools that, people are actually using that you might not be exposed to if you're just doing, coding-focused courses online, And then second is, like, I think it really helps with, like we were talking about the sort of mindset thing where it's like, can I do this? And, if you don't have like a rich background in computer science, you're going to be susceptible to this kind of imposter syndrome where you're like feeling like you're not like, oh, I'm not actually even a real programmer. How could you do this? And so at least for me, and I think this has got to help everybody, that getting in touch with some real people and seeing how they operate and what they know and what they don't, at least for me, that's really helpful for moving past some of that, because like seeing that the people who are doing these jobs for real and getting paid money to do them and whatever, they're not like wizards or something that have access to secrets that you can never touch. It's like they're like smart people who've done a lot of work and spent a lot of time, but like once they're sort of humanized, then it feels like, some of the psychological barriers that, I don't know, for me that helped break some of those down. You're like, no, this is like a real thing that I could do too. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. I know I sprung it on you last minute, so glad you could make it on. And this was a fun conversation. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah.
So this show was produced and edited by Podcast Motor. If you'd like to access the show notes, you can head to artofproductpodcast.com, and we'll see you next time.